Welcome to Root Law. Chocolate. For most of us, it's a simple indulgence. A quick rush of sweetness picked up from a convenience store aisle. But its origins lie far beyond the modern supermarket. It was once a sacred elixir, sipped from golden chalices by kings and offered as tribute to the gods. This is the story of a mysterious seed that sparked wars, fueled piracy on the high seas, and built global empires. Forged by 5,000 years of blood, sweat, and industrial revolution, we're diving into the dark, fascinating history of how a bitter potion became the world's most beloved billion-dollar industry. Section 1. Origins in the Amazon. Our journey doesn't begin in the heart of Mesoamerica, as historians believed for decades. It starts over 5,300 years ago, deep in the beating heart of South America. In the dense, sweltering, breathtaking rainforests of what is now modern-day Ecuador. This was a cradle of life, where nature was at its most untamed, a sprawling canvas of infinite green. Growing in the humid, suffocating understory was a peculiar tree that seemed to defy the ordinary laws of nature. Instead of blossoming at the ends of its branches, this shade-loving tree sprouted its flowers directly from its thick trunk. Centuries later, scientists would bestow upon it a Latin name that literally translates to food of the gods. Theobroma cacao. Sprouting from that trunk were alien-looking, massive pods. Cracking one open revealed a stunning contradiction. Inside lay a sweet, sticky, cotton-like white pulp. But buried deep within that innocent sweetness was one of nature's most bitter secrets: the purple cacao seeds. The indigenous Mayo Chinchipe people were the first humans to unlock its hidden potential. In their riverside settlements, they harvested this bizarre fruit. Yet they had no interest in the bitter seeds. They were after the sweet pulp. By fermenting the fruity flesh, they brewed a potent, intoxicating alcoholic beverage. They weren't eating chocolate. They were getting drunk on its casing. The true magic of the seed, however, was unlocked by a small chemical miracle. By leaving the seeds and the remaining pulp wrapped tightly in broad banana leaves, they allowed the sweltering heat to induce fermentation. This natural alchemy began to break down the harsh, toxic-tasting tannins inside the seed. Once fermented and left to roast under the equatorial sun for days, these beans lost their raw bitterness and turned a deep, rich brown. And in that moment, they developed the complex, earthy, and intoxicating aroma that serves as the absolute foundation of all chocolate today. The cacao had finally awakened. But this magical seed was not destined to remain confined to South America. Utilizing migration routes, merchant canoes, and secret jungle pathways, it moved steadily north. It was embarking on an epic cultural journey, heading straight into the heart of the great, blood-soaked civilizations of Central America. These ancient, cracked clay vessels, unearthed from deep beneath ruined temples, serve as the silent archaeological proof that chocolate's long and earth-shattering journey had only just begun. Section 2. The Drink of Gods and Currency of Kings. When cacao reached the north, to the Olmecs, the Maya, and later the mighty Aztecs, it was no longer just sustenance. For these civilizations, it was a divine gift, handed down directly from the heavens. Cacao trees were sacred, immortalized in the frescoes and stone carvings of their most important temples. Legend dictated that Quetzalcoatl, the revered feathered serpent god, had snuck into the gardens of paradise, stolen the sacred cacao tree, and brought it down to earth. His goal was to provide humanity with endless energy, wisdom, and power. The other gods were so enraged by this theft that they banished Quetzalcoatl from the heavens. Cacao came to mankind at a truly divine cost. The Aztecs crushed these god-given seeds with wooden mallets, grinding them into a fine paste. They mixed it with cold water, fiery chili peppers, cornmeal, and fragrant vanilla to create xocuatl, the bitter water. This was nothing like the sweet hot cocoa we know today. It was a harsh, spicy, frothy energy bomb. The thick foam on top was considered the most valuable part of the drink. The beans were so extraordinarily prized that in the sprawling Aztec markets, they didn't use gold or silver. Cacao was literally their currency. Money actually grew on trees. If you wanted to buy a rabbit, it would cost you 10 cacao beans. A strong slave? 100 beans. Even taxes to the empire were paid in cacao. And where there is money, there is fraud. History's first counterfeiters didn't forge coins, they forged cacao. Hustlers would carefully hollow out the husks of the beans and fill them with clay, earth, or wax, trying to pass them off in the markets. For the Aztecs, cacao was the absolute backbone of their economy. To flaunt his limitless power and wealth, the infamous Aztec Emperor Montezuma II reportedly consumed 50 golden goblets of frothy chocolate every single day. These goblets were made of pure gold, and with staggering arrogance, the emperor would toss each precious cup into the lake after just one use. For him, cacao was the ultimate display of invincibility. But the drink also held a much darker symbolism. It represented human blood. At the pinnacle of their towering pyramids, during brutal sacrificial rituals, doomed captives were given gourds of chocolate before their hearts were torn out. It was believed this sacred liquid purified the soul and bridged the gap between the mortal and the divine. Sometimes it was even mixed with hallucinogenic mushrooms or the blood of previous victims. When the Spanish finally breached the gates of Tenochtitlan, they were stunned. The empire's legendary grand treasuries were not solely overflowing with gold as they had hoped. They were packed to the ceiling with millions upon millions of cacao beans. Section 3. The European Conquest. The year is 1502. On his fourth voyage, Christopher Columbus's fleet intercepted a massive native trading canoe off the coast of Honduras. It was filled with what Columbus described as strange brown almonds. He noted that when a native dropped one of these almonds, they scrambled to retrieve it as if they had lost an eye. Columbus didn't understand why, and he returned to Spain completely unaware that these seeds would soon conquer the world. The true devastating blow was delivered by the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortes, who decimated the Aztec Empire with steel and deception. Cortes loved gold, but he possessed the mind of a merchant. He realized cacao wasn't just a bitter drink, it was a boundless energy source for his troops, and the literal liquid fortune. "This drink," he wrote to the Spanish king, "can keep a soldier marching all day without fatigue." Shipped back to Spain, chocolate was domesticated by monks and court chefs to suit the European palate. They stripped away the fiery chilies and added refined cane sugar, cinnamon from Ceylon, and vanilla. It was served hot, not cold. No longer blood red and bitter, it became a sweet, decadent luxury. For nearly a century, chocolate remained the greatest, most fiercely guarded secret of the Spanish aristocracy. A secret that English pirates failed to comprehend. When a crew of British privateers captured a Spanish galleon on the high seas, they stormed the cargo hold, expecting gold. Instead, they found tons of brown beans. Assuming the cargo was useless sheep droppings, the furious pirates dumped the priceless cacao into the ocean and burned the ship to the waterline. A fortune lost to ignorance. But chocolate's borders were broken in 1615, when the Spanish Princess Anne married King Louis XIII of France. As it permeated the French courts, it became the ultimate obsession of the elite, the artists, and the nobility. Chocolate was the liquid embodiment of power, status, and seduction. By the mid-17th century, a different kind of revolution was brewing in the streets of London. Exclusive chocolate houses sprang up, densely smoky, cacao-scented clubs where only wealthy men were permitted. A single cup of chocolate cost the equivalent of a common labourer's weekly wage. These weren't just quiet cafes, they were roaring hubs of high-stakes gambling, destructive gossip, and political sedition. Kings feared these chocolate-fueled gatherings could spark rebellions, and spies frequented the salons to gather intelligence. The aristocracy practically worshipped it. Even Queen Anne refused to start her day without her specially prepared hot chocolate, served in an ornate, gold-rimmed porcelain pot before she even left her bed. However, the sweet luxury gracing the lips of European nobility came at a horrifying, blood-soaked cost on the other side of the world. Section 4. The Industrial Revolution. Up until the 19th century, no matter how much sugar you added, drinking chocolate was a heavy, greasy, and difficult to digest affair, due to its high natural cocoa butter content. Gentlemen drinking hot cocoa would often be left with an unappealing, yellowish film of fat coating their majestic moustaches and beards. The formula needed a revolution. And that revolution didn't come from the elegant salons of the aristocracy. It came from the roaring, smoke-belching factories of the Industrial Revolution. For the first time in history, chocolate was ripped from the hands of the elite and surrendered to the merciless gears of machinery. In 1828, a Dutch chemist named Casparus van Houten changed history forever. He invented a massive hydraulic press that could crush roasted cacao beans with such force that it squeezed out the heavy cocoa butter. What remained was a fine, easily dissolvable powder. Known as Dutch cocoa, this invention was the absolute cornerstone of modern chocolate. Soon after, in 1847, the British Fry family had a radical idea. They took that cocoa powder, added sugar, and then remixed it with the extracted cocoa butter. They poured this thick paste into molds. The result was the world's first solid, edible, breakable chocolate bar. The liquid elixir of gods was now a convenient pocket snack. Meanwhile, in the snowy peaks of Switzerland, another visionary duo was at work. Daniel Peter and Henri Nestlé. Dark chocolate was still quite bitter and harsh. They managed to combine Nestlé's newly invented powdered milk and condensed milk with cacao paste. The outcome? Milk chocolate was born. Sweeter, softer, and universally irresistible. Yet the chocolate of that era still had a gritty, sandy texture. That is, until Swiss chocolatier Rodolphe Lindt accidentally left his mixing machine, the conch, running all weekend while he went hunting. Returning on Monday, he expected a ruined batch. Instead, the continuous friction had evaporated the bitterness and pulverized the grit, creating the smooth, glossy, melt-in-your-mouth texture we know today. A mistake had engineered perfection. Across the ocean, in the heartland of America, Milton Hershey was thinking bigger than anyone. He didn't just build a factory, he built a utopian city around it. A town with schools, parks, and theaters where the streets were named after chocolate brands. His visions was clear. Tear chocolate away from the monopoly of the rich and put it squarely in the pockets of the working class. Assembly lines ran 24 hours a day, churning out millions of identical bars, loaded onto trains and shipped to every corner of the globe. Chocolate was now the food of the masses. But behind the deafening roar of this industrial triumph lay a colossal human tragedy that very few wanted to talk about. Section 5. The dark side of chocolate. The West's hysterical, insatiable demand meant that the cacao tree had to be violently uprooted from its native South America. It was shipped thousands of miles away to the colonial territories of West Africa. Those millions of tons of sweet, affordable chocolate were built entirely on a foundation of slavery, colonialism, and spilled blood. European imperial powers slashed and burned forests in nations like the Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Sao Tome to establish vast, sprawling plantations. Indigenous populations were enslaved on their own land, forced into brutal labor and whipped for the slightest mistakes. For the workers producing the raw material for European children's treats, the taste of chocolate was nothing but bitter. Rusted, heavy cargo ships departed daily, hauling tens of thousands of tons of bagged beans to the wealthy capitals of Europe and America. While the West grew infinitely richer, the cacao-producing nations were left politically unstable and shackled to extreme poverty. All the value went to the sellers. Absolutely nothing remained for the growers. Tragically, this dark past isn't just a memory confined to history books. Even today, at the very bottom of the billion-dollar corporate supply chains, you will find farmers wielding machetes in grueling conditions without basic labor rights. The shadows of child labor and modern slavery continue to hide inside the wrapper of a cheap candy bar. But the winds of change are finally blowing. Movements like fair trade certification and a generation of conscious consumers are actively fighting to break this cycle of exploitation, forcing the industry toward transparency. The seals on our packaging are teaching us to question the story behind the product. Farmers who receive fair, living wages are banding together into powerful cooperatives, gaining leverage against mega corporations. They are finding ways to produce cacao with dignity on their own land, ensuring their children go to school instead of the fields. And as the farmers are empowered, the quality of the cacao skyrockets. This today, a booming bean-to-bar artisanal movement is rescuing chocolate from mass industrialization. Sourcing beans directly from farmers, these boutique workshops prioritize transparency, ethical labor, and unparalleled craftsmanship. Eco-friendly agroforestry methods are halting deforestation, while humane working conditions are writing a brand new, clean, and sustainable chapter for the future of chocolate. Because true sweetness can only be found when it is paired with justice.
Section 6. Modern Wars, Luxury, and Science.
Moving into the 20th century, chocolate proved it was more than just a snack. It was a strategic asset capable of shifting the morale of wars. During World War II, the US government commissioned the D ration, a high-calorie, intensely hard chocolate block engineered not to melt in the desert or jungle. On the front lines, chocolate was a weapon of survival. It presents one of history's greatest paradoxes. On one side, soldiers in muddy trenches gnawing on rock-hard rations. On the other, elite boutiques in Belgium and Paris selling exquisite gold-flake truffles and pralines for the price of diamonds. Chocolate achieves what no other food in history can. It simultaneously appeals to the absolute bottom and the absolute top of society. Today, walking down a supermarket candy aisle presents a dizzying, colourful illusion of infinite choice and freedom. But behind this dazzling variety lies a fierce and ruthless corporate reality. The hundreds of brands on the shelves are deceptive. The vast majority of this massive global market and its multi-billion-dollar supply chain is controlled by just a few mega corporations, the Big Five. The diverse brands you love are ultimately governed by the same overarching vision, directed from imposing glass skyscrapers. Everything we eat is a marvel of engineering. From the brightly coloured, hard candy shells, originally designed so that chocolate wouldn't melt in a soldier's pocket on the battlefield, to the cheap, air-puffed or wafer-filled bars specifically marketed as a working-class tea-break companion in 1930s Britain. Behind every brand we cherish, there is a brilliant, calculated, industrial design. Yet, consumer habits are shifting rapidly. As the dangers of excess sugar become undeniable, we are seeing a massive migration away from ultra-sweet milk chocolate, back to the pure, intense, high-percentage dark chocolate. In a way, we are returning to our roots. Modern science is now putting chocolate under the microscope, studying its potent antioxidants, blood pressure-regulating flavonoids, and mood-enhancing compounds. Ironically, science is positioning chocolate exactly as the ancient Maya and Aztecs did thousands of years ago, as a powerful, healing, medicinal elixir.
Liquid chocolate, masterfully tempered on a cold marble slab, a flawless crystallization of cocoa butter that marries chemistry, patience, and art. Born from the humid soils of the Amazon, transformed by modern sculptors into breathtaking, edible masterpieces of design. From blood-soaked rituals deep in the jungle, through the heavy chains of colonial slavery, past the roaring gears of the Industrial Revolution,
and under the lens of modern science, it has travelled an unimaginably long, dark, and miraculous path just to deliver that fleeting moment of pure bliss on our palate. The next time you place a small square on your tongue and wait for it to melt, know that you aren't just eating a simple candy. You are consuming 5,000 years of history, fallen empires, industrial revolutions, and one of nature's greatest secrets. Thank you for joining us on Root Law. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts as we continue to uncover the hidden, ancient roots of our world. Until next time.